47 ships, sir. Battle cruiser class and above. They're forming attack formations. Kira stared at the display in horror. The human fleet consisted of only 8 ships, all of them smaller than a single Void Hunter cruiser. Commander, you need to retreat. This is suicide. Doctor, Sean said, walking to the command console, let me tell you something about humans. We've been fighting impossible odds since we first walked upright. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, natural disasters, and each other. We've learned that the key to survival isn't having the biggest weapons or the strongest armor. It's being adaptable. It's being unpredictable. And it's never, ever giving up. He activated the ship's communication system. All ships, this is Commander Chun. Execute Operation Death World. The human fleet suddenly scattered, each ship heading in a different direction. But they weren't retreating. Instead, they were moving toward specific Void Hunter vessels, using flight patterns that made no tactical sense. Sir, Jorek said nervously, what are they doing? Professor Reeves answered instead of Chun. They're using the Void Hunter's size against them. Those massive ships are powerful, but they're not maneuverable. The human ships are small enough to get inside their defensive perimeter. On the display, Kira watched as the first human ship approached a Void Hunter cruiser. Instead of engaging in a conventional attack, the human vessel did something unprecedented. It attached itself to the enemy ship's hull like a parasite. They're boarding, she whispered. Not boarding, Sean corrected. Infecting. Suddenly, the Void Hunter ship's energy readings began to fluctuate. Its weapons powered down, its shields collapsed, and its propulsion systems went offline. Whatever the humans had done to it was spreading through the ship's systems like a virus. The Darwin Protocol, Professor Reeves explained, seeing Kira's confused expression. We developed it after studying captured Void Hunter technology. It's a computer virus designed to turn their own adaptive systems against them. The more they try to fight it, the stronger it becomes. More human ships reach their targets, each one delivering the same treatment. Within minutes, half the Void Hunter fleet was crippled, but the remaining ships had learned from watching their companions fall. They began targeting the human. Vessels with concentrated fire. Shields at 60%. Okafor reported as the determination shook under enemy fire. Continue the mission, Shen ordered. All ships, Phase 2. The second phase was even more audacious than the first. The human ships that had successfully infected their targets now detached and began moving toward the still functional Void Hunter vessels. But they weren't alone. The infected ships, their systems now under human control, began firing on their own fleet. This is insane, Kira breathed. You're turning them against each other. Divide and conquer, Chun said. It's an old human strategy. When you're outnumbered, make sure your enemies spend more time fighting each other than fighting you. The battle became a chaotic melee as infected Void Hunter ships engaged their uninfected companions. The human vessels darted between the giants, delivering more infections and coordinating the growing rebellion within the enemy fleet. But the Void Hunters were learning. The remaining uninfected ships began targeting their converted companions, destroying them before the infection could spread further. Soon, only a dozen of the largest enemy vessels remained, but they were the most dangerous ones. Commander, Okafor reported, we're detecting massive energy buildup in the remaining ships. They're preparing to use some kind of super weapon. Sean nodded grimly. They're going to try to destroy the entire system rather than let us win. Professor, is the Harmony engine ready? Sir, we still haven't reached the coordinates Dr. Morvith provided. We don't need to, Sean said. He turned to Kira with an expression that was both apologetic and determined. Doctor, your research was excellent, but incomplete. The Harmony engine wasn't hidden in the Kepler 442 system. It was hidden much closer to home. What do you mean? It's buried under 2 kilometers of ice on Earth's moon. My people have been excavating it for the past 50 years, ever since we first detected the Void Hunter signals. We've been waiting for them to come to us. Kira felt the blood drain from her face. You mean this was all planned? You knew they would attack the outer systems first? We knew they would follow their pattern, Chun said. Consume the weak first, then move inward toward the core worlds. But we also knew that eventually they would reach Earth. And when they did, we wanted to be ready. A tactical display showed the remaining Void Hunter ships beginning to glow with building energy. Whatever weapon they were preparing, it would be powerful enough to destroy everything in the system. All ships, Chun broadcast, initiate final protocol. Send the signal to Luna Base. A new contact appeared on the display, moving impossibly fast from the direction of the outer rim. It was small, no larger than a fighter craft, but its energy signature was off the charts. The Harmony engine, Professor Reeves announced, mounted on our fastest courier ship. The small craft streaked through the system, dodging fire from the yachts. Void Hunter ships. As it passed each enemy vessel, something extraordinary happened. The massive ships simply stopped. Their energy readings dropped to 0. Their weapons powered down, and their hulls began to crack and deteriorate. What's happening to them? Jorik asked. The Harmony engine disrupts their ability to convert matter into energy, Chun explained. Without that ability, they can't maintain their molecular cohesion. They're literally falling apart. One by one, the remaining Void Hunter ships collapsed into clouds of drifting atoms. The threat that had terrorized the galaxy for 5 years was ended in less than an hour by a species that most civilizations had dismissed as primitive as the last enemy vessel disintegrated. Chun turned to Kira with a tired but satisfied smile. Doctor, I believe you wanted to study ancient weapons. How would you like to help us understand what we just used? Kira nodded, still stunned by everything she had witnessed. Commander, I have to ask, if Earth had this capability all along, why didn't you act sooner? Why did you let so many worlds fall to the Void Hunters? Chun's expression became serious again. Because we needed to understand them first. We needed to learn their patterns, their weaknesses, their technology. And we needed the galaxy to see what they were truly capable of, so that when we finally revealed ourselves, everyone would understand that Earth wasn't just another primitive world asking for help. We were the help you were waiting for, Kira realized. The galaxy spent so long looking inward, toward the core worlds where civilization was oldest and most advanced, Chun said. But sometimes the solution comes from the edges, from the places you least expect. Earth may be a death world, but it's also a world that breeds survivors. And sometimes that's exactly what the galaxy needs. As the human fleet began rescue, operations for the survivors of other attacks throughout the system, Kira looked out at the stars and realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted. The quarantined death world had become its protector, and the children of the harsh mother had shown everyone what it meant to never give up. Asterisk. How are they moving like that? Krekstal demanded, his voice tight with the first whisper of fear. Their engines should not be capable of such acceleration. Before Vextar could respond, the humans fired back. The weapons that emerged from the Yarji. Human ships were unlike anything in the Krath arsenal. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, they launched solid projectiles that moved at significant fractions of light speed, railgun rounds accelerated by magnetic fields to velocities. That turned simple metal into planet-killing weapons. The first salvo struck 3 Krath cruisers simultaneously. The kinetic energy was so massive that the ships didn't just explode, they disintegrated, their molecular bonds unable to withstand the forces involved. Where proud warships had floated moments before, only expanding clouds have superheated. Plasma remained. Vextar's jaw dropped open, revealing rows of predatory teeth. In 30 years of conquest, he had never seen weapons with such destructive potential. Impossible. No species has mastered kinetic acceleration to such a degree. The human fleet continued its deadly dance, each ship moving with mechanical precision, while unleashing torrents of relativistic projectiles. The Krath formation, designed to intimidate civilian populations, proved woefully inadequate against an enemy that treated space combat as a three-dimensional chess game played at the speed of thought. This is Commander Voss to all Krath vessels. The human commander's voice cut through the chaos of battle. You have 30 seconds to begin evacuation procedures for your slave holds. After that, we stop targeting your engines and start targeting your life support. Vextar roared his defiance. We do not negotiate with inferior species. All ships ramming speed. We will show these Deathworlders how the Krath face extinction. But as the surviving Krath vessels charged forward in a final desperate assault, something happened that would be remembered in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human ships stopped evading Dot instead. They moved directly into the path of the charging Krath dreadnoughts, their hulls opening to reveal boarding pods that launched with the precision of thrown spears. The pods struck Krath hulls and burned through armor plating that should have been impervious to such small craft. From each pod emerged figures in black, combat armor that seemed to absorb light itself. The Krath defenders, veteran warriors who had conquered a dozen worlds, found themselves facing enemies that moved with inhuman speed and fought with a ferocity that defied comprehension. Captain Kane led the assault on the Bone Crusher, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to process combat information faster than baseline human thought. His squad moved through the ship's corridors like a force of nature, their weapons speaking in the harsh language of hypervelocity rounds and plasma charges. The Krath warriors, for all their natural advantages in size and strength, found themselves outmatched by opponents who had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought with the desperate cunning of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a planet that considered them prey dot in less than 20 minutes. The battle was over. Asterisk the reckoning. The aftermath of the battle left the asteroid field strewn with the wreckage of Krath vessels, their hulls torn open like discarded shells. The human fleet moved through the debris with methodical efficiency, their boarding teams extracting survivors and prisoners with the same professional competence they had shown in combat. Zelek 9 stood in the observation deck of his mining facility, watching the rescue operations with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans moved with mechanical precision, their black-armored figures clearly visible against the star field as they transferred rescued slaves from the destroyed Krath ships to their own medical bays. Administrator Tyler 7 approached, with hesitant steps, his crystalline features reflecting the lights of the human vessels. The human commander is requesting permission to board. She wishes to speak with you directly. Zelek 9 nodded, straightening his ceremonial robes. He had heard stories about humans, of course. Every spacefaring species had. They were the newcomers to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most species regarded them with a mixture of curiosity and pity, for they came from a world so hostile that simply surviving dissensions was considered miraculous. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet where the environment itself was actively hostile to complex life. The gravity was crushing by galactic standards. The atmosphere was a corrosive mixture of gases that would kill most species in minutes, and the native life forms had evolved into killing machines of unparalleled efficiency. But seeing humans in action Zelik 9 began to understand why their homeworld had produced such formidable beings. Commander Voss arrived with a small escort, her environmental suit allowing her to breathe in the facility's nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. She moved with the controlled grace of a predator, her ice-blue eyes taking in every detail of the Zephyrian architecture and technology. "Administrator Zelik 9, she said, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed at odds with the ruthless efficiency her forces had displayed. "I'm glad we arrived in time. Are your people unharmed?" Zelik 9 performed the traditional Zephyrian greeting, his four arms moving in a complex pattern that conveyed respect and gratitude. "Commander Voss, your intervention saved not just our lives, but our very existence as a free people. The Krath would have enslaved us all, worked us to death in their mines. We are in your debt." Voss shook her head, a gesture that the Zephyrian recognized as a human negative. "No debts between friends, Administrator. The galaxy has room for many species, but no room for slavers. The Krath made their choice when they decided other beings were property. If I may ask," Zelik 9 said carefully, "your tactics were unlike anything in our databases. How did your ships evade the Krath plasma weapons so effectively?" A slight smile played at the corners of Voss's mouth. "Humans have been fighting in 3 dimensions for thousands of years, Administrator. Our ancestors learned aerial combat in atmosphere before we ever reached space. What seems impossible to a ground-based species is just advanced maneuvering to us." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "But that's not why I'm here. We've recovered intelligence from the Krath vessels that changes everything. They weren't just raiding your facility. They were mapping this entire sector for a full-scale invasion. Your mining operation was just the first target." Zelik 9 felt his blood chill. "How many worlds?" 47 inhabited systems in this sector alone," Voss replied grimly, "including 3 major population centers with billions of civilians. The Krath were planning to enslave entire civilizations." The implications hit Zelik 9 like a physical blow. The Krath invasion fleet would have swept through the sector like a plague, leaving nothing but slave worlds in its wake. Billions of free beings would have been reduced to property, their cultures destroyed, their children raised as cattle. "What can be done?" he asked. "Surely the Galactic Council will act now that we have proof of Krath intentions." Voss's expression became grim. "The Council will debate for months while the Krath prepare their invasion. Bureaucracies don't move at the speed of war, Administrator. But humans do." She activated a holographic projector, showing a 3-dimensional map of the local stellar region. Red markers indicated known Krath positions, while blue showed human fleet deployments. What Zelik 9 saw made him gasp in shock. The human presence in the sector was far larger than anyone had suspected. Ships that had been classified as exploration vessels were revealed to be heavily armed cruisers. Mining operations were actually forward military bases. What the galaxy had seen as humanity's peaceful expansion was actually the deployment of a military force unlike anything in recorded history. "For the past 5 years," Voss explained, "we've been tracking Krath expansion patterns. We knew they would eventually turn their attention to this sector, so we prepared accordingly. What happened here today was just the opening move." Captain Kane appeared in the doorway, his black armor now scarred from battle. He had removed his helmet, revealing a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Cybernetic implants glowed softly at his temples, and his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of a veteran who had seen too much war. "Commander," he reported. In his gravelly voice, "We've finished processing the prisoners. Warlord Vextar is among the survivors. He's requesting an audience." Voss nodded. "Bring him to the main conference chamber." It's time the Krath understood what they've started. 20 minutes later, the captured Krath warlord was escorted into the facility's main meeting room. Vextar's proud bearing had been replaced by something Zelek 9 had never seen in a Krath before: genuine fear. The warlord's scales had lost their vibrant crimson color, fading to a dull brown that indicated severe stress. "Human commander," Vextar said, his voice lacking its earlier arrogance, "I demand to be treated according to the Galactic War Conventions. I am a prisoner of war, not a common criminal." Voss studied the alien warlord with the dispassionate gaze of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. "Warlord Vextar, you've enslaved entire species. You've committed genocide against civilian populations. You've violated every law of warfare recognized by civilized beings. What makes you think you deserve the protection of laws you've spent? You're career-breaking?" The Krath leader's jaw worked silently for a moment before he found his voice. "You cannot judge us by your weak standards, human. The strong rule the weak. This is the natural order of the universe. We are predators. You are prey. That you have temporarily gained the advantage changes nothing." Kane stepped forward, his enhanced physiology making him tower over even the 8-foot-tall Krath. "Predator?" His voice carried a dark amusement. "Warlord, you have no idea what a real predator looks like." He activated his personal holographic projector, showing images from Earth's history. Dinosaurs that would dwarf the largest Krath. Predatory fish with jaws that could bite through starship hulls. Microscopic organisms that could kill with a single touch. "This is where we come from," Kane continued. "A world where everything is trying to kill everything else, where the only rule is adapt or die. You think you're predators? You're scavengers, compared to what we evolved alongside." The images changed, showing human military history. Warriors in bronze armor holding passes against overwhelming odds. Pilots in primitive aircraft dogfighting at speeds that would kill most species. Soldiers advancing through hellish battlefields where the environment itself was a weapon. "We've been at war with our own planet for 50,000 years, Voss added quietly. "Every natural disaster, every disease, every predator taught us the same lesson: survive or be forgotten. You call us Deathworlders, like it's an insult. We call it Tuesday." Vextar's scales had now faded to nearly white, a sign of abject terror in his species. "What ... What do you want from me?" "Information," Voss replied. "Locations of Krath slave worlds. Military deployments. Command structures. Everything you know about your empire's operations." "And if I refuse?" Kane's smile was absolutely terrifying. "Then we extract it anyway. Human interrogation methods are very ... thorough. We learned from the best teachers, our own world, where hiding information means death." For the first time in his brutal career, Vextar found himself on the receiving end of genuine intimidation. The humans weren't just threatening him. They were explaining, with clinical precision, exactly why resistance was futile. It was somehow worse than being tortured. It was being shown that his entire worldview was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the universe. I will provide the information you require," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Over the next several hours, human intelligence officers extracted detailed information about Krath operations across 17 sectors of space. What they learned painted a picture of an empire built entirely on the suffering of others. Millions of slave worlds, breeding facilities for useful species, and extermination camps for those deemed worthless. But they also learned something else. The Krath Empire, for all its brutality, was fundamentally weak. It relied on intimidation and the unwillingness of other species to fight back. When faced with genuine resistance, their entire military doctrine fell apart. "Administrator," Voss turned to Zealot 9, who had watched the interrogation with fascination and horror. "I'm going to make you an offer. Humanity is planning a campaign. to liberate every craft slave world in this sector of the galaxy. We could use the help of species who know the local systems. Zelek 9's forearms trembled with emotion. Commander, the Zephyrians are not warriors. We have no weapons, no military traditions. How could we possibly assist in such an undertaking? You have something more valuable than weapons, Voss replied. You have knowledge, mining expertise, asteroid navigation, resource management. War isn't just about fighting, it's about logistics, supply lines, and understanding the environment. Your people could save human lives by making our operations more efficient. The Zephyrian administrator straightened, his crystalline features reflecting his growing determination. Then we will help. The Krath have terrorized peaceful species for too long. If humanity is willing to fight for freedom, the Zephyrians will support that fight however we can. 6 months later, the campaign that would be remembered as the Liberation War began in earnest. Human fleets struck at craft positions across 17 sectors simultaneously, their attacks coordinated with the precision of a master conductor leading an orchestra of destruction. The battles were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human forces didn't just defeat Krath armies, they dismantled them with clinical efficiency. Slave worlds that had been under Krath control for centuries were liberated in days. The feared Krath war machine, which had seemed unstoppable for so long, crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. But the humans didn't stop at military victory. They established refugee centers for liberated slaves, medical facilities for the traumatized, and educational programs to help former slaves rebuild their shattered cultures. They approached peace with the same methodical thoroughness they had shown in war. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity revealed its true nature. They were indeed Death Worlders, evolved on a planet that should have killed them 1,000 times over. But that harsh evolution had produced something unprecedented, a species that combined the ruthless efficiency of apex predators with the compassionate wisdom of beings who understood suffering. When the last Krath stronghold fell, Warlord Vexstar was brought before a tribunal of liberated species. Representatives from 47 worlds testified about Krath atrocities, their voices shaking with emotion as they described generations of slavery and oppression. Commander Voss, now promoted to admiral after her role in the campaign, stood as the tribunal's final witness. Her hair had gained streaks of gray during the long months of warfare, and her eyes held the weight of command decisions that had shaped the fate of civilizations. The question before us, she said to the assembled representatives, is not whether the Krath Empire committed crimes against sapient life. The evidence of that is overwhelming. The question is what we do now that they can no longer harm anyone. She gestured to Vexstar, who sat in shackles designed by Zephyrian engineers to hold even Krath strength. This being represents a culture that saw other sapient species as property. But killing him won't undo the suffering he caused. The question is whether we can build something better from the ashes of his empire. The tribunal's decision was unanimous. The Krath Empire would be dissolved, its former territories placed under the protection of a coalition of liberated species. Former Krath military personnel would face individual trials, with sentences ranging from rehabilitation to life imprisonment, depending on their crimes. As for the Krath homeworld itself, it would be quarantined until the species could prove it had learned to coexist peacefully with other forms of life. It was a harsh sentence, but considering the alternatives, it was merciful beyond anything the Krath had ever shown their victims. Admiral Voss stood on the observation deck of her flagship as the Liberation Fleet prepared to return to human space. Around her, the ships of a dozen species formed a protective escort, former enemies united by the shared experience of fighting for freedom. Zelek-9 approached, his movements still graceful, despite the minor injuries he had sustained during the campaign. The Zephyrian had proven himself to be a valuable tactical advisor, his deep understanding of asteroid fields having saved countless human lives during the siege of the Krath Fortress worlds. "Admiral," he said, performing the elaborate gesture of respect his people reserved for great leaders, "on behalf of all the liberated worlds, I must ask, what will humanity do now? You have the most powerful military force in known space. Many species fear you will become the new Krath Empire." Voss smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a warm, genuine expression. "Administrator, humanity learned something important. During this campaign, we're not conquerors. We're not even particularly good at ruling other species. But we are very, very good at one thing." "What is that?" "Standing up to bullies." She gestured toward the star field ahead, where refugee ships were heading back to their liberated homeworlds. "The galaxy is full of peaceful species who just want to live their lives in freedom. As long as someone threatens that freedom, humanity will be there to remind them why that's a bad idea." Zelek 9 pondered this for a moment. "And when there are no more bullies? When the galaxy is finally at peace?" Voss chuckled, a sound that held both warmth and a hint of the predatory nature that had made humanity so effective in combat. "Then we'll go back to what we do best, exploring, building, and making friends with interesting people from interesting worlds. After all, Administrator, the galaxy is a big place. There's always something new to discover." As the fleet entered hyperspace, heading home to Earth, Admiral Voss reflected on the campaign that had changed everything. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors or empire builders, but as the species you called when someone needed to be reminded that freedom wasn't free. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the years that followed, the Liberation War would be studied in military academies across known space. But more importantly, it would be remembered by billions of former slaves who could now raise their children in freedom, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Deathworlders stood watch,